Hello and welcome to the Car Care channel, and welcome to the Lexus RCF. The F cars for the longest time with Lexus have been truly impressive from a brand that normally makes very sensible cars. But ever since the Lexus LFA came out, they have been really shifting their focus to make their F cars truly special. And in some cases they did well, others they didn't. In today's video, we're trying to find out if the Lexus RCF is one of those good ones or not. And this particular one happens to be a Track Edition. So we're gonna visit that as well and see if this Track Edition is also worth it or not right after this. Let's start our technical review under the hood. In case you're watching this and you're wondering about the other RC models, let's briefly run through them and then we'll focus on this one. So you have the RC300 with a 4-cylinder turbocharged 8AR FTS, very ancient engine. I think it is time to get rid of that and get into something like the T24A or something like that, but they still have that ancient 8AR. Then the RC350 has 2G RFKS, beautiful engine, V6, very reliable, very old school. But this one is the RCF. And this beautiful masterpiece of an engine, and it's truly a masterpiece, is a 2UR GSE. Very old engine that have gotten a few updates over the years, but it is truly special because it makes a lot of power. It's naturally aspirated. There is not really cutting edge technology anymore in this. They just don't make V8s like this anymore. The best thing about this engine is it's a high power engine that is reliable. And usually, the truth have to be said, as a mechanic I will tell you this: high power engines usually are not reliable because they are pushed to their limits, and that's just a sacrifice something has to give. This makes decent power. It's not the top, there are more powerful V8s out there, but it's extremely reliable even if you push it. And that's the best part about this. And with that, let's dive into some technical stuff. This is an all aluminum engine, including the valve covers. Again, this comes from a different era. 2-piece cylinder head, roller rockers. The construction of this engine is very similar to that of all UR series that you'll find in everything from a LS luxury car from some years ago, all the way to trucks. Well, not anymore, but you know what I mean. You'll find a similar construction in that to the Tundra 5.7. Some people will jump off their seat and say that's not the case. That is the case once you open the engine and look underneath it, not on paper. This engine is kind of Lexus took one of their current engines and made it better. That's why this one is good. The recipe for this engine is very simple. Old school. I mean, the injector drivers that sit right on top of the valve cover, they're huge and they're old. I mean, I have seen this design for years. It's never changed. There's just been perfected and made better. This has Toyota's D4S system. Direct and port injectors. 2 fuel pumps, not 1, 2 direct injection fuel pumps. Pretty loud at times, but that's how they are. Very basic fuel injection. Cooling system, same thing. Very basic cooling system. Mechanical water pump. Everything is pretty simple. And then the biggest thing about this is back on the mechanical construction. This has dual VVTi. Intake and exhaust on both sides. The intake, this was actually, when this engine came out, it was a groundbreaking thing that the intake one is electronic. So a little motor in the front, it spins the inside of the timing gear. If it speeds up faster than the cam, it advances the timing. If it slows down, it retards it. If it's spinning at the same time, we're at base timing. Right now, in 2020, end of 2023 here, this is ancient technology. At the time, it was groundbreaking. Now, the exhaust is oil controlled. Very, very basic. The oiling system in this car, or lubrication system, is very interesting. And it was groundbreaking at the time, not anymore because it's an old school engine. So this has a normal oil pump at the nose of the crank and the part of the timing cover, pretty simple. But then it also has a belt-driven scavenger pump. That all that does is, if you're pulling high G's on a track or whatnot, it actually helps keep things going, because the basic oil pump at the nose of the crank is just that from a truck. It can't really keep up with these high G's, so they put that scavenger pump to help it. Things are extremely basic here. The one thing I will say about this engine that can make some people, or some mechanics rather, scared of it. This engine is super reliable. There's not a lot of people that work on this engine. And for some reason, the aftermarket support for it is not very high, because many people look at this and see it old school and complicated, just too complicated to modify and do this. And that is the truth with this engine. Fortunately, modifying this engine is not an easy task because of that EVVTI, because of some of the old school ways that this engine management works. That's one of the downsides. As far as reliability, this engine really have a few issues. One of them is the coolant valley leak. There's a giant heat exchanger at the, underneath the intake manifold. Loves to leak on these. Not the later iterations like this one, but the early iteration, this was a very common thing. A little bit of an involved job, because again, this engine, not a lot of people have experience with it. Then the valve covers love to leak on these. Again, the older iterations, fuel pumps love to leak on these. But otherwise, water pumps as well. I might as well mention that. But otherwise, they don't have like, oh, the oil burning on this and that, unless you neglect them. And even if you neglect them slightly, they'll still keep going. This is a very well-made engine and a true masterpiece, just from the way it sounds and the way it delivers power and the torque range. It's a beautiful engine. And I wish they would have updated this further. They updated it at some point, but I wish they would have updated it further to bring it into the 21st century. I think we would have kept going, but unfortunately, emission regulations are becoming an issue, and V8s are slowly being phased out in exchange for V6s with twin turbo. This engine is the most important thing on the RCF, and it's truly a masterpiece. Now, the transmission that has made it to this engine in the RCF is the A880E, which is an 8-speed transmission, super old school transmission, folks, and this is possibly one of the Achilles heels of this drivetrain. This engine, which is the same as the LC500, if this engine made it to the 10-speed in the LC500, is a much better combination, and it just pains me that they updated the RCF at some point, and they did not change the transmission. They just kept it the same. That's the same problem with the IS500. I see it here. It feels incomplete. This engine with the 10-speed is just a completely different thing than this engine with the 8-speed. That's possibly the only downside in this powertrain. While that 8-speed is extremely reliable and very well built, it's just too slow. It can't keep up with the power that this engine makes, and you feel it laggy, you feel it not, it almost kills the joy of this engine. That's the only problem with this powertrain. Let's take a look underneath the RCF Track Edition. And you notice everything is covered up. This is pretty standard with newer cars, but here's what Lexus did that is very interesting with this engine. The drain plug is right here, very simple. You see it right there. If you look over here a little bit to the back, this little door with these 3 screws, that's where your oil filter is. Service is actually very simple on this engine. There is not a lot of complication. And usually high-performance engines, even though this is kind of a dinosaur of a high-performance engine, usually they come with a lot of complications to the service. This it's just another Lexus, and that is the good thing about it. Let's take a look at the front suspension. This is, for lack of a better word, an ancient front suspension. I mean, there is not a lot of difference between this and the regular RC350. Lower control arm, that is aluminum. Very simple design, very simple ball joint, single ball joint in the bottom. Takes you no more than 15 minutes to change this ball joint, which is pretty simple. Adjustable shock over here, which does use the type that connects at the top, which is a little bit more difficult to service, but not a big deal. Single aluminum control arm at the top. Things are extremely simple. But then we have to talk about the brakes. In this particular Track Edition, this is a massive 6-piston caliper with carbon ceramic rotors. Let's turn around and look at these rotors. So This, ladies and gentlemen, is a 15-inch rotor. And you notice that cracked appearance to it. That is normal for carbon ceramic brakes. For lack of a better word, these are not brakes. These are earth rotation stoppers. That's the best way to describe these. Folks, carbon ceramic brakes, most of the cars that have carbon ceramic brakes, they don't really need them. And this is one of those. Unless you are exclusively going to drive this on a track and push the limits, you don't really need carbon ceramic brakes. And another little addition to that, these brakes, should they wear out one day, and one thing on carbon ceramic brakes, they're noisy, create some dust, and they are extremely expensive. I mean, unbelievably expensive. If you want to replace the front rotors and the pads and the rear rotors and the pads in this beautiful Track Edition, you're looking at a bill of over $15,000 for original parts. The question is, what did they exactly do? Is this some bespoke system that bolts on? So I went researching for you guys to kind of find out, what did they exactly do here? The hub is the same. The knuckle is the same as the non-carbon ceramic brakes. The only difference is the ABS actuator is different. Master cylinder is the same. Everything else is basically the same. So technically, these are, you can buy these and put them on any RCF. You might have some issues with the ABS system, but otherwise, they'll work exactly the same. And catch that theme, keep it in mind, because we're going to talk about it a little bit down the video. Let's continue on. Everything from the front, except the brakes, all the way to the mufflers is exactly the same in the Track Edition as it is in the normal. Very high quality, very well put together. This exhaust, it's super high quality. You just look at the welds, everything looks very, very nice. This transmission, the A880E, is exactly the same as the LC500 and this. And it is a very ancient transmission, super reliable. But the problem is with cars like this, the reliability is usually not the only thing. This transmission is one of the kind of Achilles heels of this particular car. Steel oil pan, very basic transmission, doesn't have a dipstick. Then as we move back, the drive shaft's all the way behind these beautiful heat shields, they're really high quality. We go to the differential, and this is one of the things with the RCF Track Edition. So the RCF has an option for a torque vectoring rear differential. Well, this one doesn't have it. This one just has the Torsen limited slip differential, possibly for weight. But here's my problem. This is a giant behemoth of a differential. It's cast iron body, and that's a lot of weight. I mean, they went so far in this car to save weight, and then they left this differential in here. That's okay. That's what they, yeah, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. The exhaust, though, is different in the RCF. This is a titanium exhaust, and you can see the reflection of the color here. It's completely different. Super high quality exhaust, I have to say it. And it's nice, but again, just so you know, in case you own a regular RCF and you really need this in your life, there is 2 bolts right here, few hangers, and you can get this from an RCF Track Edition bolted to your car, and now you have a titanium exhaust from the factory. Let's look at the rear brakes. Again, a massive caliper in the back with an equally enormous rotor. I mean, let's just say one thing. This rotor is so large that normal cars have half the size of this rotor in the front, let alone the rear. These brakes are way overkill for this car, but they're here should you need them. Should you really need to push the envelope with this car on the track, these are the brakes to go. One thing is, these are made by Brembo. They're not really made by Toyota. The calipers at least are made by Brembo. The rest, another supplier I notice here says made in Germany. So they're not exactly made by Toyota. Moving on to the rear suspension. Let's take a look at that. Again, nothing really changed here from the regular model to the regular RCF to the Track Edition. Aluminum lower control arm, some steel, aluminum knuckle. Things that are very basic. Same huge axle, very beefy. And the same deal with this like tie rod adjustment, or the tie rod style toe adjustments, just to keep the toe steady. Everything is basically exactly the same. But the one thing have to be said, this is so well made. And that's really one of the huge reasons you buy this, is how well it's made. And you see here, even the things nobody can see, everything is really put together well, and that is the signature of this car. Let's take a look at the outside of the Lexus RCF Track Edition. Now, at the front, you got a spindle grille. It's love it or hate it. That is very objective. Behind the Lexus logo, you do have your radar cruise control right here. The Toyota and Lexus seem to always put them there. And then the first thing with the RCF Track Edition is the addition of this carbon fiber little scaffolding around. Again, once more, this is something you can add onto the bumper. It is not a different bumper. Headlights are extremely nice on the RCF. I think the RCF in general, not just the Track Edition one, it's a very sharp looking car. I think it looks pretty good. There is not a lot going on with the design, even though you look at all this, but body lines are not very busy. Then the carbon fiber hood on the Track Edition. Again, 4 bolts, and this comes off. You can put it on any other car with this vent. Now, this vent, this style vent, is not meant to let air in. It's actually meant to let air out. Air comes through here, goes out, and to kind of ventilate and cool things better. But here is the problem with that. Air comes through here, and we open the hood, and air comes through here, and it goes to a closed space. Yeah. This is not an actual functional vent, but that's okay. That's, yeah, $100,000 car. Moving on. These wheels are exclusive to the Track Edition. They're BBS wheels. They're very lightweight, very cool wheels. And then once more, we will note that these are wheel bolts that Lexus now and Toyota equally are going to that, which also come off. You can put them on any car because the hub is exactly the same. Nothing changed there, even though we have the massive carbon ceramic brakes. Watch the theme of the things that I'm telling you about, because we're going to talk about this in a little bit. This is exactly the same as the regular RCF. F-pads, very nice. Some ducts here. And then you look at the very bottom, you have another piece of carbon that is also attached in the bottom with bolts. The rest of the body is exactly the same. And something about the RCF in general, it doesn't have kind of an overdone body, kind of like the ISF or even the IS500 a little bit. The body is subtle. It has a subtle change that is nice. The front fenders do come out a little bit. The back here comes out a little bit. They are staggered tires. The fronts are smaller than the back. But it's not a lot to look at. It's actually a nice looking car. You do have this little indentation here, which just adds it a little bit more character, which I think they didn't overstyle this. And then also something very exclusive about the Track Edition is the roof, which no, this does not bolt on with a few bolts. And that is about the only thing that is exclusive about the body that is not a bolt-on. You notice the fin, though, it is not carbon fiber, so it just kind of sticks out. Moving on to the back, to the biggest edition, which is this giant wing. Carbon fiber wing. If you are under the age of 20, this is very cool. If you're any other age group, this is just a bit much. Because the RCF, the regular one, does have an automatic little spoiler that comes up. Very classy, it hides, but now we have this big. Good thing is, you can put your coffee here when you're cleaning the car. It's pretty high, you don't have to bend down and get it. I think that's just my opinion of it. Very beautiful looking back. I think they did this really well. The bottom piece is also carbon fiber. The typical F car exhaust that is staggered to the side. I think it looks pretty cool. This is a titanium exhaust as we just looked at underneath. The RC in general, not just the F, the RC is a good looking car. It's heavily based off the IS but it just gives it a very different character. It's not a two-door IS like we've had before. This is a very nice car. Now we look at the trunk. It's actually a pretty big trunk for a car of this size and segment. You do not have a spare tire here. Of course, we're not anticipating one. You do have the inflate kit, and they give you a little stud in case you need to change the tire, because this doesn't have studs. This has bolts, so you put this, it's plastic though. I wish this was a metal one, but that's okay. This is a very practical trunk, I think. You can daily drive this car, and you can see with their design, they were intending for you to do so. Well, let's take a look at the inside of the RCF Track Edition. And one thing have to be said about this interior, it is very old. But at the same time that it's old, it's very well put together and it's very easy to operate, and that can appeal to some. For example, your HVAC controls, they're all physical, except the temperature. You have this little touch capacitive dial thing here. That's okay, but everything else is physical button. Very simple to operate, not distracting. Now underneath that, you do have a relic, a CD player. This interior is very similar to that of the IS, current generation IS, but the best thing about it is it's so well made, and that's, you get in so many high-end cars, you just feel like they're glued together. This feels solid. It comes from a different time where cars were made differently. Now, the Track Edition adds and takes away some stuff. You don't have heated and cooled seats. Understandably, they're trying to save weight, although we'll talk about that in a little bit. Then there's no sunroof. Again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, the seats, even though they are this exclusive F seats and they're very tightly bolstered, for what they are, they're actually pretty comfortable, and that is the good thing about them. The steering wheels, all this Alcantara. I usually don't like Alcantara, by the way. I wish it was just regular leather, because this does not wear well with time. Same thing with the shifter, same thing with this armrest. That's just how they deemed it. Now, the gauge is a very old school gauge. It is kind of a half screen. It's a very old school screen. But the coolest thing about this is the speedometer is this very interesting font. It's very small. It's just a beautiful thing to look at, honestly. So other stuff that they added in the Track Edition is they put carbon fiber around the window switches on both sides and a little bit on the dash, just to make this feel a little bit more special, because as we'll talk about in a little bit, there's not a lot of special things about this to justify its price. Now, the back seat in this is basically a non-usable seat. You can put some items, maybe a small child, but then again you need a child seat and that kind of takes that out. But even with that, they made a little cool feature. So when you put the seat down, it automatically rolls forward to make entry to the back easier. At least they do that before your legs get crushed, because it is extremely tight in that back seat. If you're buying this to have any kind of back seat use, possibly that's not a good idea. It's the recommendation. Now, here's the small things with this car. See, this is the hot model. This is the special halo model, the RCF. Even if we're talking about the regular RCF, there are certain things that are very typical Lexus. We have an eco mode in this almost 500 horsepower V8 car, eco mode. And then when you drive in normal mode, you have an eco indicator, just to make sure that we are getting excellent gas mileage and driving economically. See, these are the little things that just get copy pasted over from the regular model, that just tells me they didn't design this from the ground up. They just copy pasted the interior and let's do this. These are the little things that I wish Lexus would do better. Just when you make a halo model, do it from the ground up. But the one reason remains that you would buy this car is just how well this is made and how easy it is to live with, and that has to be said. Now, driving this car, it is, with this Track Edition one, the tires are a little louder. It is, after all, they're performance tires and the wheels are very lightweight. You do feel them, especially when you're like slow speeds, certain bumps, they'll make a horrendous noise. But other than that, this is still every bit as much a Lexus. It's pretty quiet, pretty refined. The ride, when you put it in comfort mode or normal mode, It's not super jarring, but it's not the most comfortable either. You put it in Sport Plus, it becomes super jarring, but you still feel the weight of this car. And that is the biggest concern with this. It's a very heavy car. And the other thing is the steering. It is nice, but it needs a little bit of work for a performance car. It's more comfort oriented than it is performance oriented. And that's when we go back to Lexus not completely redoing this car to be a performance car. You notice the things that they missed or skipped over, and as a performance car, there can be big issues. Let's talk about some things I do not like about the Lexus RCF Track Edition. Starting with the biggest one, the whole car. Truth have to be said. The regular Lexus RCF is a beautiful car. It's a Japanese muscle car. It has a very reliable V8, beautiful V8. Not the greatest transmission. It's not perfect. It's not the fastest car in the world, but at its price point, it's a pretty decent car. If you want to daily drive a car that is fun, that is not going to break every time you take it to the track, you enjoy it and life is great. But my problem starts with the Track Edition is the price. $105,000 as tested right here. That puts you in the territory of the LC500, which is better than this in every level, period. There is nothing more to be said about this. But wait, some will say, well, the Track Edition is lighter, so it makes it better. Of course, losing weight on a car, performance-wise, makes a huge impact. But this car, the regular RCF, is a very heavy car for what it is. And this, even with all the weight loss at the expense of some important options and the massively expensive brakes and wheels, by the way, if you didn't catch that, the brakes, if you want to replace them front and back, they're $15,000. It's still a heavy car. The steering wheel is still a little vague for a performance car. It's still extremely heavy, and you feel it when you drive it. That's the problem. So you're paying almost double for not really double the performance, and that's the problem. And on top of that, the Lexus LC500 is right there next to it in the dealership. It really kills this one. If this was priced a little better, it would make a lot more sense, but even then, the regular RCF is just a beautiful car. They didn't need to make a Halo version of a Halo version and do it like this. They could have done it a lot better than this, and they didn't. That's okay. We still have the LC500 if we must. And if we don't have that kind of money, just get the regular RCF and you'll be very, very happy. So should you buy a Lexus RCF? Folks, here is the God honest truth. The Lexus RC, without the F, the regular Lexus RC, it's a pretty nice car. It's comfortable. It's very well made, it's very reliable, and it looks pretty good. It's basically the best way to get a two-door Lexus IS. Now, the Lexus RCF is equally an impressive car. It has the beautiful 5-liter V8, the 2UR. It is such a good engine. They just don't make engines like this anymore. The only thing that hurts the Lexus RCF is that 8-speed transmission. I wish they would have, as they updated this car over the years, they would have put the awesome 10-speed from the Lexus LC500. They didn't, and that's okay. But then we talk about some of the things that are not good with the Lexus RCF. The regular one first. Transmission, of course, being the biggest thing from a performance standpoint. It's very laggy, very old. And the whole car is extremely lacking in technology. I mean, you can buy a Lexus NX, for example, that is a family SUV. It has a lot more technology. So when you come to a kind of a performance car that is a hot car, the Halo model, you'd expect it to have all that. Well, we still have a CD player. That's okay. Some people still want CD players, but you're trying to impress people with this model. Well, from a technology standpoint inside, it's not impressive at all. It's very old and very laggy, and you feel like a flashback from the mid-2000s. That's basically how it feels like. Now, let's talk about the RCF alone itself. It's a truly impressive car for a few reasons. Build quality, reliability, and it still have decent performance. Not the top of the line performance, but It will impress you. It will put a giant smile on your face. It's very heavy, so as a performance car, don't expect to be taking on the track and really being number one. But you'll have loads of fun with it. The best way to describe it is it's a Japanese muscle car. Reliable, big, thrash, naturally aspirated engine with no gimmicks and fragileness. This is a car you can really push to the limit and it'll keep going. And that's the fun part about it. Usually performance cars are becoming fragile. That's the truth. But then we come to the biggest problem with this car. The RCF Track Edition. Folks, the regular RCF starts around $68,000. If you option one a little bit, it'll get into 70, 75. That's more like it. The RCF Track Edition starts at 101. And this particular one is right around 105. That takes the problem of old technology and a little bit not top performer, takes it to the next level of not good. That's the problem. Because here is the recipe for this car. What makes this special? They saved some weight by bolting on lighter components. The brakes. Do you really need this earth stoppers for this car for its performance levels? You actually don't, because the regular RCF has really good brakes. And then the carbon fiber everywhere. All this change saved about 123 pounds, somewhere in that neighborhood. While that does make a little bit of a difference, there's a lot in this car that could make huge difference. Not this little weight saving over this giant cost, you almost double the price. But truly the biggest problem is the way this was executed. They're all bolt-on parts except the roof. Anything in this car, you can take your normal RCF, put this stuff on it, and now you have a Track Edition. That's the problem. They did not change the engine power. They did not put a 10-speed here and call from the LC500 and say, this is the special edition. They didn't. They just bolt on stuff and they changed the roof to a carbon fiber one. And the biggest problem, the absolute deal breaker for this car is the LC500. It is superior to this in every way. From the interior, especially with the new 24 updates, from the way it looks, from the exhaust sound, from everything. And this Track Edition one puts you right in the range for an LC500. So my question to you is, why would anyone buy this and not buy an LC500? I don't know. Nothing makes this special over the regular RCF, which is a beautiful car. It's not perfect, but it's beautiful. But the Track Edition one, for its price, I'd rather stick with the RCF, or if I'm going to spend this much money on a car, the LC500 will not disappoint you with this beautiful dual personality that kind of does both worlds very well. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some other videos. And until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.